Now we're getting into the retirement section. So this is kind of the heart of the reports for Easy Money, as retirement is typically the ultimate goal for your clients. So this section is going to focus on if the clients are going to have adequate income and capital to fund their retirement goals. So let's take a look at the retirement capital graph. The first graph is actually showing their annual expenses over time, including inflation. There's also a yellow line available that you can see here. This shows the expenses in today's dollars. The second graph at the bottom here is the total capital available, and this is the graphical view of the client's total assets over time. If they run out of money, you'll see a shortage display in red. This report is going to be followed up by the details report, which isn't directly after, but it's available on the retirement capital estimate, which is C6. So this is a graphical view of that retirement capital estimate page, which we'll get to in just a moment here. But first, we're going to look at the retirement needs analysis. So the retirement needs analysis is going to display the client's total income needed to cover their expenses from retirement to life expectancy, and it's going to compare that to the total income streams available from retirement to life expectancy, which help offset the spending need. So total expenses less income derive the income shortfall. This is the amount that the clients are going to be spending. This is essentially the amount of spending that will exceed their income sources from items like pension and Social Security. The last line of this report is the estimated capital required at retirement to satisfy the shortfall. So assuming a typical situation where the client would be spending more than they have coming in from outside income sources, they would have a shortfall. And the program is going to determine the amount of assets that the client would need to have saved by retirement in order to cover their future income shortfalls. This report moves directly into the following page, which is the retirement capital analysis. That's going to actually consider the amount of assets that the clients are projected to have by the time they retire. So if we move on to that retirement capital analysis, this report is going to carry over that client's total income shortfall and the capital required to cover that shortfall from the previous page, the retirement needs analysis. Next, it's going to list the client's assets and their projected balance at retirement. If the client's total asset values exceed the capital required, then the program essentially has determined that the client has saved enough to cover their future cash flow shortages, and they're not projected to run out of money prior to life expectancy, so they're on track for a successful retirement. If the client's assets values at retirement do not meet or exceed that capital required, then the clients are going to have a shortfall and they're going to deplete their assets prior to their life expectancy. If it is a situation for a shortfall, the program is going to display shortage solutions, and those shortage solutions are going to include achieving a higher rate of return on investments, increasing their saving, which solves for monthly additions required at 3 different rates of return. It's also going to look at the ability to delay retirement age as well as reduce spending. So if we look at this retirement estimate solution, C5, this report will really only be of use if the clients are running a shortage. If they are, this is going to project how the client's shortage would be fulfilled if they were to either increase their overall rate of return or make those deposits at the 3 different rates of return. So now we get into the retirement capital estimate. This is really the heart of the retirement reports. This shows the year-by-year summary of the client's total expenses and scheduled income sources. Any surplus that you see listed here on the annual surplus or shortage column will be automatically reinvested, and any shortage you see here will be pulled from the investment. So unlike pre-retirement cash flow, where shortages and surpluses are ignored, anything that shows up on this report, if it's a shortage, it will be pulled from the assets, or if it's a surplus, reinvested. So this is a good report to make sure that the shortages and surpluses are what you're expecting. So the resulting asset balance will display in the last column, so you can see how their asset balance changes year by year. And let's see here, if that total account value no longer shows a value, that means that the clients have depleted their assets, so the retirement capital has been depleted. This is also a great place to talk about using the audit trail. So if you have the Audit Trail notes turned on, which again, you can turn those on or off if you go back to the Assumptions and Report Options tab. Take a look here, and here you can turn this on or off, but I do recommend having it turned on, especially as you're exploring the reports and breaking down the numbers. But you can see the little Audit Trail references. For example, if we had a question on the expenses, we could take a look at the Audit Trail reference. It will tell us which report page to go view to get a more detailed breakdown. So in this case, the detail behind the expenses is in the appendix section. So we'll open up the appendix section, go to the report page referenced, and you can see how that's broken down. So you can see all the details that make up that total expense number. And if anything can be broken down further, you'll notice it will also have an Audit Trail reference on the bottom right. So you'll notice all the reports are numbered on the left-hand side. So each category has their own number. Their own letter followed by a number. So the investment section are the B's, the retirement section is the C's, and so on. So this is a great report to really focus on. It is also followed up by the asset accounts. So this is going to give you more information about how the account balances are changing for each type of asset over the lifetime of the projection. This again, we could take a look at the supporting type details. So if we want to see exactly how the taxable account, for example, was changing year by year, we could take a look at the appendix section. It's referencing report H1, and we can see all the elements that are factored in for how that taxable account balance is changing year by year. Going back up to this retirement section, if we look at total asset accounts, this is going to display the total asset account balances over time and how the balances change with things like additions, withdrawals, taxes, and the rates of return. Next, we get into the retirement Monte Carlo simulation. So you'll notice here the graph, we've got the blue line. The blue line is going to be the fixed results. So the projection that we saw in C6, so the results given the fixed rates of return that we've entered into the system. The gray lines that you see here are going to represent a sampling of the 10,000 trials that are run using the random rates of return. And if we look below the graph in little font here, we can zoom in a little bit, but you'll see the standard deviation that's used, and it will show you that it will show you what 95% of the rates will fall between, so the first two standard deviations here. And the program will go out a total of 5 standard deviations. You can also choose to have the fat tail option included, which is going to add more emphasis to those extreme negative market events. So looking at the numbers at the top here, the original retirement capital estimate, that's how much they're projected to end up with on that blue line, or the same numbers we would see on the retirement capital estimate, assuming that fixed rate of return that we've entered in the system each year going forward. The minimum worst case essentially is going to be the worst case of those 10,000 trials that are run. The average is going to be the average of those 10,000 trials, and the maximum would be the top results of those 10,000 simulations that are run. When we look at the percentages on the right-hand side, the percentages of results above 0, that would be of those 10,000 trials, how many of these trials did not run out of money, so they never hit 0. You can also see that there's that percentage available for 3 different ages as well, so you can see how their overall situation is changing throughout the years. So the last section, the last reports of this section are the withdrawal rate pages. They're going to compare the total funds available to the withdrawals that the client's making for their shortages to determine the net withdrawal rate each year. There's a moving average graph as well. This is going to show the average withdrawal rates over the periods of annual, 3-year, 5-year, and 10 years.